Bishop Curry, it's wonderful to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Suddenly, you were there, an American priest, delivering a sermon at a royal wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Why did they choose you?
I can only guess.
Yeah.
I can only guess. I don't actually know what was the basis of their decision making. And I remember when they called, there was a member of my staff, I said, okay, you're kidding me. So I didn't believe it at first. And then realized they were serious. And I said, well, I would be honored, of course, to do so. And then I had to kind of wait to find out what the Bible text was, what was going to be the passage that was going to be used for the service, because the sermon depended on what the text was.
The Bible text they chosen by themselves.
They chose it, yeah. They chose that text. I thought it was a brilliant selection. I was expecting 1 Corinthians 13, which tends to be used a lot at weddings, and delightfully and wonderfully surprised for the Song of Solomon.
Yeah,
and
chapter 8.
Chapter 8, yeah, which is an incredible part of the text. I mean,
yeah.
it's really, I mean, it's wonderful love poetry between a couple, which is remarkable in itself, because people don't think that's in the Bible. Well, it's right there. And yet they say poems back and forth expressing their love, and they talk about how beautiful they all are, each are, and they go back and forth. And then in chapter 8, it really is remarkable. It is as though the woman kind of stops and she realizes this love that they're expressing for each other must have a source that's greater than just the two of them. Mm-hmm. And that's when it's as though the text points beyond itself and beyond the couple and looks at the source of love, which ultimately is the God who created us out of love. And that's where the text took on a life of its own. And for me, that's where the sermon came from.
And the message of your sermon, love is the way and love can change the world, is a strong message. But how does love change the world?
Well, I can tell you how it has. and I suspect how it has is an indication of how it can and will. I can think of very few movements in the history of humanity that have moved us from where we were to a much better place that have happened without someone driven by a passionate commitment to human beings, to their well-being. That's love. That's what love looks like. That there's never been any reform movement, whether it was religious or not. Without love, it doesn't happen, because if the opposite of love is really not hatred. We sometimes think that. The opposite of love is self-centeredness, is selfishness. And if that is the case, then any movement or effort that moves beyond self-centeredness to the greater good, to the good of the other, is a movement of love. That's a definition of love. And that kind of living, that kind of love has always been what has driven people to change society. If you look at the life of a Desmond Tutu, you look at the life of a Nelson Mandela, you look at the life of a Mahatma Gandhi, you look at the life of a Martin Luther King, you look at the life of a Mother Teresa. I mean, I'm just using big ones, but you look at their lives, these have been people who have been willing often to sacrifice their own unenlightened self-interest for the good and the well-being of others. And they are the folk who have changed society. But more than that, think about your own life. In your life, who are the people who actually help to shape you or help to shape me for the better? They've been people who've looked beyond themselves and saw something in you. And try, whether it was a teacher or a parent or a pastor or a coach, I mean, it could be a whole lot, but somebody who believed in you and was willing to reach out and help you become. They didn't have to push themselves up, but to help you. That's love. That's what love. And so I would submit that disciplined, organized, and mobilized love has always been the only force that has ever changed anything.
And how can that change ordinary people who are struggling with problems, sorrows, losses, hardships of life? How can love change their lives with their troubles?
I think it really does begin with a personal commitment to live a life that's not self-centered. and to literally work each day. And how can I live a life that is not just centered on me?
But I am totally full of my problems. And so,
Right.
and then you say to me, be not so selfless. I have my problems.
Exactly. So how can I address and deal with my problems, but deal with them in such a way that it's not all about me? I have known people who have, I was with the family of Trayvon Martin, who was gunned down in Florida, an innocent young man who lost his life. His parents, they can't bring him back, but I was just with them a couple of weeks ago. They can't bring him back, but what they are doing now is working to change gun laws in this country. They're working to change gun laws and have reasonable and sensible background checks and that kind of thing. And they're fighting an uphill battle, but by doing that, by working so that other parents don't suffer what they suffered, they can't bring their son back, but they are helping to redeem, to allow his death to make some sense. So they actually are helping themselves, but by giving themselves to others, they actually help themselves in the long run. I know people who have members of their family who struggle with mental illnesses and mental diseases, who now work and advocate to help this country have better laws and better ways. I mean, I can go on with folk like that. I know in my own life, the time when I've focused only on myself, and not thought about others as well, is when my own problems get bigger and maybe bigger than they actually are. And sometimes when I deal with my own problems, but also say it's not all about me. I'm here to do more than just take care of Michael, and focus as well on caring for others, whether it's my family or whether it's the larger community or whether it is just others. When I do that, somehow I find the way to manage my own problems and my own issues. So I think there's great wisdom in the spiritual discipline, and it is a spiritual discipline of moving myself out of the center of my life and allowing God and others to take the center. Then my problems, whatever they are, become manageable. They don't necessarily go away, but they become manageable. What I thought was a mountain may not be as big as it was when I'm looking at the bigger scheme of things.
Some critics in the Netherlands classified your statement, "Love can change the world," as an easy answer. How do you react to these critics?
Very easily. I'm a black man in America. When I was a child, when I was a young person in this country, I lived in segregated housing where blacks and whites did not live together. I grew up in a church that was segregated. I saw this society make some dramatic changes by the power of love. That wasn't easy. By the power of disciplined, organized, mobilized love. Right now, I'll give you another example. I mean, just a few weeks ago, we had our convention of the Episcopal Church here in the country, and we had almost 1,000 people who participated in a prayer vigil at a detention center in Texas, where women who had been separated from their children because of immigration policies of our country, which we find immoral and frankly wrong, and we stood and bore witness at the detention center. And in my opening remarks, I said, we do not come in hatred, we do not come in anger, we do not come with violence. We come because we believe Jesus when he said, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And we come to call America to love our neighbor. And the Bible says, when you read the parable of the Good Samaritan, your neighbor is not just the neighbor you agree with. Your neighbor is not just the neighbor you like. Your neighbor is every other human being. In America, you must be neighbors to the world.
You must be neighbors to the world.
That's serious love. This is not easy stuff. We're talking about organized, disciplined, mobilized love. I have seen that kind of love change America from a society where segregation was the order of the day. We haven't gotten to where we need to get yet, but we're a lot better than we used to be because of organized, disciplined, mobilized love. So I would submit that actually the only thing that has ever changed anything for the good have been people who have been committed to the way of love. Because people who are committed to the way of self don't ever do anything for anybody else.
And in the Western Europe, your sermon had a great impact. How do you explain this? And what's your secret?
I don't know that I have an explanation for that.
In the secular situation of the Western world, great impact.
You know, the truth is, whether one is religious or secular, deep down, every one of us, I don't care who you are, we just want to be loved. I don't care who we are. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted. And we want to be cared for. And at our best, we know that we were put here to love and to accept others and to care for others. When I was a little boy, I remember my daddy used to tell us sometimes when we were, I guess, having selfish moments, he used to say, you know, the Lord didn't put you here just to consume the oxygen. You know, it's not just about what I can get and acquire. It's actually about what I can give and do that actually makes a difference in the lives of others and in the life of the world. We're not here just to consume oxygen. And so I think this has nothing to do with whether somebody's religious or secular. This has to do with, are you human?
Extension.
It's about being human. I have a feeling it was the message of love actually connected, because many, and I can't speak for Europe or any other country, I can only speak here. I'm here in the U.S. We are struggling. We're in the midst of a great struggle about what values are going to govern our life together as a nation and as a society. Are we going to be governed by hatred and bigotry? Or are we going to be governed by the ways of love and justice and compassion and decency? We have to make a choice. I went to Charlottesville, Virginia, about a month after neo-Nazis and Klansmen were marching through the streets. America has seen what the abyss looks like, what hatred looks like, with neo-Nazis walking through the streets of an American city with tiki torches in their hands, shrieking hatred. When they were marching toward one of our Episcopal churches that was holding an interfaith service that night, where they brought people of different faiths who were praying for their community. Their hatred was directed at the religious community that dared to speak the name of love. And so we have seen what hatred can do, and we don't need to go there. We have got to find a better way. The truth is, if the opposite of love is selfishness, and I really do believe that it is, selfishness is the most destructive force in the universe.
In the universe. In
the universe. And it will be unbridled selfishness that could destroy the earth itself. That's how toxic. And I think deep inside, we know selfishness, hatred, bigotry, violence, this is not the way. The truth is, we know deep inside that in the end, love is the only way that has the capacity to save us all. It's the only way that ever has.
In Europe, churches are rapidly losing church members. I don't know, is it the same in your country?
We're not rapidly losing. The culture is changing. It's probably hovering and holding about the same. It's declining, but it's not rapidly.
And does your church undertake some activities to invite people to come back to the church?
Well, yeah, we really are. Well, I think one of the things that's important, and I can only speak for my own tradition, I won't speak for any other religious tradition or any other churches, but one of the things that's very important, at least for us in America, and I've said this to the Episcopal Church, is that we must begin to present a way of being Christian that actually looks something like Jesus of Nazareth, and not simply ways of being Christian that mimic either the culture or what our traditions or history have been. And if you look at Jesus of Nazareth, I'm not talking about what the church has often said about him, or I'm not talking about what the culture says about him. Look at the Jesus of Nazareth in the New Testament. This is the guy who even got a Mahatma Gandhi who actually said, well, I mean, I can follow this Jesus. I don't know about these Christians, but I can follow this Jesus. This Jesus is a compelling figure. He's got something to say. And I would argue and contend that the church is worth paying attention to if it is paying attention to that Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah. And if it is seeking to live a life that actually looks like his life. I mean, this is the Jesus of Nazareth who inspired a movement. I mean, we sometimes forget that. Jesus of Nazareth inspired a movement of a group of his followers who eventually turned their world upside down. Mm-hmm. They became a community. They were all native-born, mostly Palestinian Jewish folk. And yet they realized that the way of Jesus actually called them to include people who were beyond their own natural kinfolk. And they created what we would now call a diverse, multicultural, multi-ethnic community that included rich folk and poor folk, slave folk and free folk. I mean, it is stunning. They did. This is before the Magna Carta, before universal declarations of human rights, before the French Revolution, before the American Revolution. They created a community and a society of freedom, equality, and brother and sisterhood. They did it following Jesus. Man, that's a message. Now, I think now, if the church is proclaiming that kind of message, somebody's going to want to listen. And I don't blame them. If we're not, I wouldn't want to listen either.
And today, it is Back to Church Sunday in the Netherlands. What would be your advice to the churches in the Netherlands to welcome new people into church?
Welcome them to communities passionately committed to living the way of love. And we may not always get it right. We make our mistakes, but we know where we want to head and where we want to go. And come on and join us and help us go there for real and create communities of faith that reflect the love of Jesus. And then help us create a society and a world that reflects that same love. And if we do that, going to church won't be just about going to church. It will be about helping to build a better society.
Will they find in the church the love you preached about?
I hope so, but I won't speak for the Netherlands. I don't know. Well, you know,
speak for your situation.
What you will find are normal human beings who are trying. And I'm willing to give somebody a shot if they're trying. The only perfect person, I mean, Jesus, God, ultimately is the only perfect. But people who are on the way, who really are committed to moving in the direction of a love-filled life. I want to be part of that community. Even the Apostle Paul himself. I mean, you know, you don't get much bigger than the Apostle Paul, right? Mm-hmm. So even the Apostle Paul himself, in his letter to the Philippians, says, "Not that I have already arrived. I haven't." He says, "But I press on toward the mark of the upward call of God in Jesus Christ." That our task is to press on, to be heading. We sing a song here, we are marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. Our job is to be marching towards Zion. It doesn't mean we've gotten there yet. Dr. King even said, I know and believe we will get to the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I believe we as a people will get to the promised land. Our job is to be marching toward the promised land, marching toward the standard and the goal of being a love-filled life. And if we're marching toward it, we're better than we would be if we were walking away from it.
Yeah. And I understood you grew up in a family of ministers. As a child, did you want to be a minister?
As a child?
Yeah.
Oh, of course. You want to be like your dad. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah. As a little kid, I used to play church and make my sister, my little sister, she had to make her have to take communion and make her get baptized. And oh yeah, I used to.
And do you also remember the moment you decided to become a?
That was later. Awesome. I mean, you know, in all honesty, at one point when I went off to college, I was kind of open to a whole lot of possibilities. But I mean, ministry was a possibility. But I had worked in the campaign of Senator Robert Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, when he was running for president, actually. And it was the year he was assassinated, in fact. And so, I mean, he was sort of one of my heroes. And he, you know, people like that had gone to law school, and then they went into government or public service. And so that was a possibility that I was thinking about, you know, go to law school. And then I took a course and actually had to read some of the actual writings of Dr. King, not just, what people were saying about him and that kind of stuff. And I realized, I said, wait a minute now, this guy was in ministry, and he actually had an impact on society for the good, and it was the gospel of Jesus of Nazareth that helped him do it. And that's when I started paying attention. I said, well, maybe Daddy and Mama and Grandma and all those, maybe they were on to something. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that led to a journey that eventually...
has become very important. It's been very important for you, Martin Luther King.
Part of my life. Very much so, yeah. That was back in college. That was a long time ago now.
Yeah. You were ordained as a minister and you became a bishop. What were your dreams?
I really did believe, and do actually, years later, that we each have the capacity to alter the environment that we are given, which is to say, we do not have to leave the world, our portion of it. I don't mean the whole world. I don't have control over the whole world. We don't have to leave our portion of the world the way we found it. We can improve it and make it better. The Jewish tradition has this notion of tikkun olam, to heal the earth, to heal and nurture creation. I believe that we have each been put here to care for, to heal the creation. And if we each do our share, the world can be changed. It actually can be. That's not a fiction. That's a fact. But even more than that, I believed that the way of Jesus of Nazareth actually is world changing. And I saw that in Dr. King's life.
And in your life, you have achieved their dreams and
I hope so, a little bit, just a little bit. In each parish where I was the local parish priest and when I was ordained a bishop and now as a presiding bishop, I hope that I'm helping to shift something. I don't have to do the whole thing. None of us can do the whole thing. But if I can use what I've got to help to make this better and to refuse to be complicit with the way things are, to refuse, the act of refusal by working to make things better, seems to me that's a declaration of humanity, what it means to be truly human and not just a victim of fate.
Some time ago, you came up together with other Christian leaders and theologians in the US with a statement called Reclaiming Jesus. Mm-hmm. What is this statement all about?
Well, it really was a statement encouraging Christians to actually reclaim the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth as well as his spirit. That very often Christianity is presented as something that doesn't look anything like Jesus of Nazareth. When Christian leaders are silent, in this country, while children were being locked in cages because their parents migrated here, fleeing conditions in Latin America or around the world, that is not Christianity. That is not Christianity. For Christians to be silent when public education doesn't provide equal opportunity for every child, regardless of their race, class, creed, religion, or anything else, that is not Christianity. For Christian leaders to be silent while we continue to exercise the death penalty unnecessarily in this country, that is not Christian. I mean, I can go through the list, but it's not just issue-driven. It has to do with Christian leaders to be silent while lying is becoming a value that is replacing truth in our country. That is not Christian leadership. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can find ways to learn to live together with decency and integrity and honor and with love. And for some Christian leaders and Christians to be quiet while other people are being hurt, that's just wrong. And reclaiming Jesus means we need Christians to reclaim following Jesus of Nazareth and to reclaim being people of love. And being people of love means you don't sit by quietly while somebody else is being hurt or is suffering. You do what you can to help. Mm-hmm. That's the way of Jesus of Nazareth. I've read the parable of the Good Samaritan. I know what the brother said. I know what the New Testament says about him. And he says, you shall love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. And then adds, on these two hang all the law and the prophets. That's Jesus saying it's all about love. And I like to say when I run around the Episcopal Church, if it ain't about love, it ain't about God.
And as I read the statement, it reads to me as implicit protest against the current administration of President Trump. Am I right?
It's bigger than President Trump. It's bigger than that. We did not focus on him as an individual. we focused on the values that this current political and cultural atmosphere in this country is inculcating, where lying is allowed to go unchecked, where bigotry and hatred, as in the Charlottesville experience, are not rejected, as this is not the American way, where rejection of immigrants and refugees in a country. I mean, we're sitting here in New York City, and the Statue of Liberty is not far away from where we are right now. That Statue of Liberty stands in the harbor of New York and says, "Bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." That's what America is about. And those values, when those values are being debased, someone must stand up and say, this is not the Christian way, and this is not the real American way. So this is bigger than President Trump.
So it's a message to the whole United States.
That's right. This is a message to the United States. We must reclaim our heritage, our real heritage. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's what reflects a Christian value. That's what reflects our Judeo-Christian tradition. But that's a value of what it is to be American. And so we were saying America must reclaim those values.
And is it a political statement?
It's a spiritual and theological statement that has clear political implications.
Can you explain that synthesis?
Yeah, that we don't speak as politicians. We speak as clergy and as people of faith about values that affect and determine our behavior in our civil society. Ours was not a political platform in terms of being a partisan political platform. Ours is a statement of spiritual values which have impact for politics and public policy, but they're not political statements in and of themselves. They are statements of values. That's one of the reasons people sort of get thrown off kilter when they hear the language of love. When Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan, he told the parable of somebody who helped somebody who was of another ethnic group or a different ethnic, different historical, a different political group, and asked who was neighbor to that man. Neighbor love transcends race, it transcends nationality, it transcends politics, it transcends ideology, it transcends religion.
So can you call it a prophetic calling of the church?
Yes.
In this moment?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. It's the calling of the church to be the church that actually resembles its Lord. That's what reclaiming Jesus is about. And when we do that, we will find ourselves not concerned with ourselves.
Not selfishness, but full of the love which can change the world.
You got it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.